Good evening and welcome. My name is Beverly Stoddart, and we thank you for joining us for this special Sunshine Week program hosted by InDepthNH.org. This week is Sunshine Week. It's a time each year to remind us that open government is not just a legal principle. It's the foundation of a healthy democracy. The public's right to know what its government is doing, how decisions are made, and how public money is being spent belongs to all of us. That right only stays strong when it is exercised, defended, and understood. At InDepthNH.org, our mission is to provide independent, nonprofit journalism that shines light on government and public policy in New Hampshire. Access to information is essential to that work. We have a great panel tonight, and as we begin our discussion about the right to know law, why it matters, and how all of us can help ensure that government in New Hampshire remains open, transparent, and accountable. Each panelist will give about a 3-minute talk about their experiences with the right to know law. At the end of the comments, we will take questions from the audience that have been submitted via the chat. With us tonight is Laurie Ortolano, a resident of the city of Nashua. She is known for her active involvement in advocating for transparency. Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thank you. Garry Rayno is our State House Bureau Chief. And I'm borrowing the phrasing, but we want Garry Rayno in the State House. We need Garry Rayno reporting on what's going on up there. So I say, hello, Garry, welcome, and thank you for doing what you do. We have award-winning reporter Paula Tracy, she works the halls of the State House, reporting on bills that are up for consideration about the governor and the executive committee. Welcome, Paula. Investigative reporter Damien Fisher brings his experience, expertise, and tenacious determination to get a story. And we thank you that you're working for us and that you're here tonight.
Thanks.
Katharine Webster is an award-winning news reporter who wrote many national features for Associated Press. We're grateful she's writing for us now. Welcome, Katharine.
Thank you.
And finally, we have Zach Laird. Zach is our newest reporter for InDepthNH.org, yet he is a well-rounded writer who reports on public meetings, hard news, and long-form writing. And tonight we're going to get to know a little bit more about Zach. Welcome, Zach. But first up is Nancy West. Nancy is the publisher and editor of InDepthNH.org. We celebrated our 10th anniversary last year, so we're in our 11th year of doing this. And so I say, welcome, Nancy, and we'd like to introduce you to the crowd, and please let us know what you'd like to say.
Oh, thank you, Beverly. And welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you came. It's going to be a wonderful evening. We thought you might like to know how InDepthNH.org reporters wrestle public documents from state and local officials from your government. And we also have our special guest, Laurie Ortolano, and hopefully we can all give you some tips on how to file your own right to know request or somehow get public records. The law is for everyone, and it's also a constitutional guarantee, to get what we need as far as public records go. And I'm kind of a half empty kind of girl when it comes to the right to know law. I'm not any right to know request I ever make. I always put the part from the Constitution, state constitution that requires open government. It hasn't helped so far, but I throw it in there anyway. In the old days, we used to have to hand type. I don't know how you would do it otherwise, but you have to type out and send by snail mail any request under the right to know law. So it is much easier now to do it online. You can find out And it's always best to ask first. Get somebody on the phone who is in charge that can release those documents. Because, my feeling is if you can get it without the right to know law, it's a rarity because if they're important, I find most of the departments and officials want a right to know request, even if it's a fairly simple thing. So if you can find the out, you can just write it very quickly. It's very simple. There's no wrong way to cite it. If I've seen people get records, even if they don't mention the right to know request, but it's hinted at, it's best to state it that you're looking for records under RSA 91A. I hear a lot of transparency during election season, but I really don't see a lot of interest in making government records more accessible or transparent. And I guess that's why I'm kind of the glass is all empty kind of gal in some respects. But I've never gotten a request that I thought was adequate, that had the information that I wanted and was in a timely manner. Usually the law requires they have to give me notice in 5 days. I always get a 5-day letter saying, oh no, that's too complicated. It'll take us 2 months. And then sometimes after 2 months, I get another letter saying 4 months. Usually by the time I get a record, I forget what I asked. And I'm not kidding on that. I literally just forget. And I think it shows when the budget was crunching last year, they cut the budget for the New Hampshire right to know ombudsman. They're now offering 30,000 a year, but the ombudsman must have 5 years experience as an attorney. And they made it a part-time position. The gentleman, Mr. Kerr, Tom Kerr, retired just about the time they were doing this. So it's been vacant for, I think, since July last year when the new part-time position went into effect. So effectively, it's now in the hands of the New Hampshire Public Employees Labor Relations Board. And they're just kind of holding records and stuff that a citizen or a reporter cannot file through the ombudsman's office. It's just closed for business until they get a new ombudsman. We have a great panel of people that really have experience trying to get the right to know. So I'm going to pass for now and see what everybody has to say. Hold your questions, and we're going to make time at the end so that we can answer them all. And thanks for coming.
Thank you, Nancy. That was a great bit of information. And up next is Laurie Ortolano, a citizen advocate. So would you explain that for us, Laurie, and then tell us what you have experienced over the years with the right to know law? You're on mute, Laurie.
I did what I should do. Okay, I've lived in Nashua for about 12 years now, and I've been actively seeking records for about 7. And I'm an accidental activist, is how I would, I stumbled into it because of information I wanted that had a personal impact on me. And it started with my assessment of my property and trying to understand why my assessment was so much higher than my neighbors. That kind of peeled off into a big nightmare situation. Because I had discovered that the mayor's property who's right in my neighborhood, was assessed quite differently from mine based on permits that were pulled. And when I identified that, I created I think an enemy for life. So that gave me a wall that was pretty difficult to get over. So but I was successful after like 3 years of getting the DRA to issue sanctions against 3 Nashua assessors to get complaints filed through. I won my property abatement in 2021 that was filed for 18 and 19 up at the Board of Tax and Land Appeal. And I won a good portion of a right to know petition where I was represented by counsel. Now, the downside of this and the very frustrating side of this is that the Supreme Court remanded back in April of last year, part of my assessing right to know petition from 2020 to have attorney's fees calculated. And that has been sitting in the court in Nashua, and it has not been acted on. Now, a new judge came in, and so that judge took over in July. But this is an issue on getting orders out. I have not been able to get closure on that right to know lawsuit, and it just entered its seventh year. That's
Wow.
very discouraging to me. It is not. And some people may say, well, what's the harm? You're not harmed, but it's potentially my money coming back to me. That first lawsuit cost me over $200,000. After that first lawsuit, I decided to go alone. And so then I moved into an art center issue in Nashua that again involved a lot of money, like $35 million of public money that funneled its way into a private corporation. It turned into a huge record search. I read over 6,000 pages of closing documents for a federal financing program, tax credit program. I got a lot of emails on how this tax credit program worked. Very concerned, went to the AG's office, the county attorney, to have them look at potential fraud and malfeasance in the city. Nobody took an interest. Bottom line, a year ago, the feds took it after numerous interviews, and it went down to the office of the inspector general, and it's in their hands, and who knows what that means because you get no communication at all. And with the changeover of the administration in Washington, the Trump administration, so much of what's happened in these federal agencies has just changed a lot, like blown up. People are gone. So who knows what that means for this case? But that case is still before the court. I won a really important part of that case up at the Supreme Court. It was remanded back to the trial court to conduct a government function test to determine if a private company could, in fact, keep public money funded through it, all the issues regarding that public money secret. And the court said, hey, you got to do a government function test, trial court. You can't just say that all those documents are private. Well, the trial court has said, we don't have to do it because the private company just conceded like 6 months ago that it's going to act like a public company now. Well, when you do that 3 years after you were asked for records, the train left the tracks and all the methods of having records is gone. They didn't maintain anything in a public record fashion. So I'm extremely discouraged that the trial court would say, I don't have to bother doing that. And most likely I'm going to put that on appeal again. That's 3.5 years fighting that. So I went to a trust fund issue, and Damien helped me out and wrote a great article on that. And I think his article, combined with a couple letters to people in the state, accelerated the state investigating the charitable trust unit, investigating how Nashua was handling $70 million of charity money, of trust fund money, which was not properly being done. I did end up getting a favorable report from the CTU, myself and a friend, saying that there were problems. So my adventure has always been about going after things that involve a lot of public money that really impact us in our community. And, the wall is tall and difficult to climb here in Nashua. I
Wow.
mean, from a citizen standpoint, obtaining records is really difficult based on two things. One is the technology within your community, so dated or old in your municipality, that getting records is difficult to do because the search mechanisms aren't there. And the second thing is what happens when your government officials are particularly dark or generally evil and they don't want to give up anything. So I'm faced with what I think are both situations, which make every request a battle. So it's very challenging. It's very discouraging. I think the state threw the baby out with the bathwater on closing the ombudsman office. I think that's been a really huge loss. I've written to the PELRB to see when they would take cases, and I got what I considered pretty unprofessional responses back that they're not doing it. So I think that that's gone, and we're really on our own, and the courts are very burdened. So going into court as a pro se litigant is brutal. You're constantly being hit by your city, and there's no place to turn. So I don't know what changes it. I'm happy about hearing some grant money for reporters and all, and I think that's good, but I'm thinking that we need some more. I think every municipality should have an inspector general group a group of citizens that serve as a local inspector general that attempt to keep their municipality in check
Hmm.
because it's got
Lori,
to happen locally. It doesn't happen at the state.
yeah, Lori, I don't want to interrupt, but I just wanted to point out that the ombudsman, to file a case with the ombudsman and get an order, if you have a dispute, was only $25 instead of the, you just mentioned huge amounts of money to
Huge.
really take cases far along in the court. They say it's going to come back, but how are you going to get anybody for, that price to act as ombudsman as a part-timer? Anyway, sorry.
I'm
No,
all set.
that's
I
a
know we
great
got to move
question.
on.
That was a great, it sounds like you're over a decade into this and thousands of dollars of your own investment as well into this. So
Yeah, it's just
you're
very.
undaunted though, right? Are you still?
Yeah, I mean, I went down to Washington. I did this conference for a couple days. It was really rejuvenating.
Yeah.
And I came back to 3 right-to-know requests that were sent to me, responses from the city, and they were horrible. I
Okay.
wanted to beat my head against the refrigerator. And
No. Refrigerators are far too expensive nowadays.
I
So
know.
thank you, Lori. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
All right, and we're going to move on now to our State House Bureau Chief, Garry Rayno, to talk about, from his point of view, the right to know law and how much sunshine is shining in our state capitol right now. Garry, can you help us with that?
It's pretty dark, as my last column said.
Mm.
I have a little different perspective on freedom of information requests. While I have filed them on occasion, I have often been able to attain public records or information through another route. I worked for much of my journalism career in the State House, covering state government and the legislature. When you're dealing with politicians, there are many motivations involved, including getting ahead of the curve. There are two parties, and whichever one is in the majority will want to keep the lid on things, while the one in the minority is often more willing to spill the beans. In the State House, you could and probably still can't find someone to give you the information the powers that be did not want you to have. For example, when the legislature was doing its first response to the Claremont education decisions, the gold standards were spreadsheets indicating the state money each town or city would receive under each plan. Near the end of the process, after it had passed both houses, an error was discovered that made a significant difference in what mostly large cities and towns were supposed to receive and what the very small school districts were to receive. When the error was rectified, the large communities received less money, and some of the small, poorer communities received much more. But the leadership in the House and Senate did not want that information out until they could brief the impacted lawmakers. But rumors have a way of leaking out, and people were hearing some of what the problems were, but not all of them. I happened to run into a friend or state senator, I should say, who was upset with this, all being done in private behind closed doors. And she gave me the new spreadsheet, which I made good use of and had a major scoop in the meantime. In short, working in the State House does not require mastering the fine art of freedom of information requests. What it requires is developing relationships with people that you know that you can trust and that can trust you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And it's absolutely imperative that you're up there making those relationships. And that could go for all of us. And everything that we do in life is developing relationships with people so we can get information exchange. So thank you so much, Garry. Next up, we have Paula Tracy. Paula, can you tell us what's going on with the governor, the executive committee? What is happening up there?
Well, I am learning from everyone. It was nice to hear Laurie's long odyssey. I'm familiar with the issues that she's had over the years. It's also wonderful to hear Garry and his experiences with the right to know. And also, I agree that Nancy, is kind of a negative on this subject. But I think there's room for us to make everything better, and there's probably a legislator or two that could be tapped on the ear and said, how can we strengthen the right to know law? My experience is different, obviously, than everybody else's. I've been almost 39 years trying to get information, 25 years at the union leader for the most part. And I've seen how things have changed in life, including, now from those for, it used to be we type things. Now there's all this electronic communication, and access to that is a new thing in 2008, which was added to the law. But I would say that in my experience, it has been a lot better for me to work and have relationships with like department heads, commissioners. And one of the things that I've been able to do because I cover the executive council and they all have to be there, is that I've developed relationships with them, and they know, me, and I know them, and they know that I know the law, and they know that they know the law. So it's a little different than maybe Laurie's experience when she was starting out as being a individual. Our being in the press, we basically, I think, get a higher, more elevated. And I was speaking to a former commissioner last week who told me that she believed that a lot of department heads don't feel that a request from the ACLU necessarily has the same weight as a request from a reporter, which makes me think that an individual citizen might have a harder time as well, and that it depends on who you are asking the question. But I wanted to go and read just something really quickly about the New Hampshire Municipal Association posts on its website about public records, that the basic rule is that governmental records must be made available for public inspection and copying at reasonable request. The government must respond to requests within 5 business days, as Nancy mentioned. Certain records are exempt from disclosure, but largely, the courts generally assume everything is available to the public. And that's different. And I wanted to say that the governor's office is not, I can't use RSA 91A to ask the governor a question or to get information from the governor's office. There are exemptions. Mostly it's elected boards and things like that. But some people don't have to play that game. I do have an active 91A request out right now. I'm on day 3, waiting for Department of Environmental Services to answer a number of legal questions. And like Nancy, I'm expecting that I will get the note saying, this is going to take us more time. But it's important to keep filing these, to keep people on their watch, that they do work for the public, and that this is information that by law we should have, with exceptions. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you so much. Next up, I have Damien Fisher. If you would be so kind to tell us how you've used the law in your reporting, and from a reporter's, what was the first time you filed a right to know request, and what did you learn from that first time when you did that?
Oh gosh, I can't remember the first time I filed a right to know request.
Long time
I
ago,
think
huh?
a long time ago. I had an editor walk me through it. I think we may have had a seminar or a class or something. You learn most by doing it. I do recall fairly early in my career reading the relevant portions of the right to know request to a board of selectmen at their meeting, because they weren't handing over payment information, which they had to do. So I had to go and tell them, no, you have to. You have to know when to push. But I agree a lot with Nancy. I'm sort of I'm resigned to no one actually following the law. And that puts me in a position like Paula and Garry, where you've got to have a certain amount of relationship building and flexibility, because every community is different, every agency is different. No one really follows the set rules, and if no one's enforcing them, there are no rules. So you've got to be social enough and flexible enough, because at the end of the day, is it more important that some town clerk in a town of 100 people follows the right to know law, or that you get the information? You've got to make that decision. So, also, like Nancy, every once in a while, I will get a right to know response that I completely forgotten that I had filed, because it's months old, and it's like Christmas every day. It's great. But yeah, you've got to be flexible, because it's, I don't know if it's possible to enforce these rules on everybody. We don't have any mechanism. The ombudsman was never going to be it. I think in Massachusetts, you can appeal a right to know dispute to the Secretary of State. It's built into the Secretary of State's function. I don't know why we don't do that here, but we don't, and it's up to you to actually enforce the law, like Laurie has had to with sort of the worst case scenario of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pocket to get them to do the right thing. But yeah, you can get your information, but you've got to know the law, you've got to know how to push, and you've got to know how to be flexible.
Yeah, I wanted to interrupt again, Damien. I totally agree with what you're saying. And I wanted to let people know, years ago when I first started filing these right to know requests, there was an attorney at the Attorney General's office who I would call up, and I can't remember his name now, but if there was a problem, he would, with a community not turning over required documents, he would behind the scenes call them up and say, you know what, you're not following the law. The Attorney General's office used to, at least informally, enforce that law before it had to go to court. And that position is long gone. Thanks.
Nancy, let me ask you this, though. Do you think that New Hampshire citizens are even aware that they have a right to request government records?
I think more are finding out now than before, ever before. I think, the fact that in 2 years, the ombudsman office had 95 decisions, that's just people who were, you know, angry enough or steadfast enough and, had the wherewithal to really push it further than just complaining like I do.
That sounds like a good number. But back to Damien for a quick second here. Could you share an example of a story or an investigation that you were working on that would not have been possible without the right to know law request that you submitted?
You're asking me for details.
Just give me a case. Give me just a case.
Oh, well, I mean, there are a lot. I think, if we go back to most recently, and this had to go to the Supreme Court, but getting the information about John Stone in Claremont, the former police officer, that started as a right to know request. I think, who was that other one? Samuel Provenza, was it in Canaan? I think that started as a right to know request to get the information on him. I have currently, I've got a right to know request along a similar line out, and the town clerk sent me a sort of a complicated, convoluted email about how they respond to it in that community, which isn't like I've seen anywhere else, but you take what you find and you go with that.
Yeah. And at least you got a response from them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you say, you all are almost teaching them. The onus is on you to let them know how to do it, which seems kind of backwards, but.
Well, you have to know what the law is, what the rules are. because you'll have to push it if you need to.
Mhm.
I used to cover a courthouse with another reporter who knew everything, knew the law, and he could never get information out of the clerks.
Mm.
But I could go in and talk to the clerks like a human, and I would get whatever I wanted. It's just you've got to be able to do that as well.
And that goes back to Paula's comments that it's relationships that you develop that help you expedite this information that you need. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Damien.
No.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, we are moving on to Katharine Webster. Katharine, would you give us an idea of what you worked for the Associated Press? I don't know, you're new to In-Depth, that we're now just talking for the first time, but just can you give us an idea of what your background was and how you use the right to know law for on a national level?
The right to know law is a state law.
It's a state law, okay.
I've used the Freedom of Information Act at the federal level with very mixed results, and that is virtually defunct now. When I was reporting on the various education laws and lawsuits revolving around DEI in New Hampshire, I contacted the Department of Education federally to find out what had happened. They had put out proposed rules. They withdrew them before the 60-day period was up. They put out new rules. It wasn't clear if they'd gotten any comments, and I stopped getting answers. So at the federal level, the Freedom of Information law might as well not exist now. They've laid off or fired most of the FOIA officers as part of the downsizing of the federal government. At the state level, I rarely had to use 91A, the right to know law. But back when I was with the AP in New Hampshire, there were a lot of attempts to narrow the scope of the right to know law that I was very involved in reporting on, and a lot of those had to do with security concerns after 9/11. They wanted to exempt all kinds of things because of security concerns. It also had to do with, well, all these select boards in small towns, you're lucky if you can get 3 people to volunteer on select boards. And if 2 of them talk outside of a meeting about, the business of the town, you're violating the open meetings law. So the first thing I want to say is to remember that 91A isn't just about government records. It's also about access to government meetings. And the Attorney General's office actually has a great explainer on their website where they publish the whole law, all the exemptions to it. And they have simplified, probably AI generated language explaining that. So for anybody who's a citizen out there, that is really worth looking at. The place where I did use the New Hampshire Constitution's right to know extensively was in reporting on the courts. And although I was the daily news supervisor for a lot of my time at the AP in New Hampshire, I also reported extensively on the courts, including leading up to the impeachment of Chief Justice David Brock, as was. And I had to fight over court records far more than I did over other government records and meetings. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Court records are not covered by the right to know law. They are covered by the New Hampshire Constitution, court precedents and rulings, and they are presumptively open. Now, back when I was a reporter with the AP, everything was on paper, and I actually wrote about should the courts put records online. And the fact of the matter is they've kind of gone halfway. There's a search service you can sign up for free that will allow you to search under the name of a plaintiff or under the name of a case number. But most often it's, let's look at the name of a plaintiff. And that allows you to see the docket, the case number, when it occurred, who the attorneys of record are. Then if you want to actually view anything in that file, you have to go to the courthouse. And just like Garry and Paula said, I mean, 99% of my access to records was being nice to court clerks. And as Damien said as well. So that's a big part of it. You can ask for copies. Files must never, ever leave the courthouse, understandably, because they're originals. But you can request copies, and there's a pretty reasonable price. So
Can you take pictures of these with your phone? Yeah.
If you have the file in front of you, a lot of them are on the computer now. So you can say, okay, you can open it up. Oh, I should have said every courthouse has one or two or more public kiosks, a computer where you can search the records and look in more detail at the records and say, oh, okay, this transcript or this brief is critical. I want to see it. So
you can save PDFs right at that kiosk and email them to yourself from the kiosk.
Right.
So that's fairly handy.
That's a great access.
So the access to the courts is much better than it used to be, because you used to have to look at the paper file, sign it out one at a time. They are not allowed to ask you why you want it. Court clerks do this all the time. You do not have to tell them that you're a reporter or that you're a citizen or anything else. You just can ask for it. The Supreme Court has its own system, which is completely different and very difficult to navigate. You have to know what kind of opinion you're looking for. All the briefs will be in the underlying court case, so good luck with that, because if you find an opinion, you have to know what year it was in, what type of opinion it was. You can call the clerk's office for help, but they're not always very happy to help over the phone. But they do the most frequently requested cases. They are very good about posting major briefs online. The other thing is, again, they're alternative sources. So for like the two big education funding lawsuits that were decided last year, those are the major briefs in those cases, and the major rulings are all on the New Hampshire School Funding Fairness Project website. The ACLU has summaries of the court cases they've brought in federal court, generally on their website, and you can see briefs there. And finally, the federal courts have their own electronic filing system called PACER. And again, you can download documents for a very small price. You can sign up for free, but you have to link to a credit card. And they will charge you to download to look at and download particular documents.
So it seems that you really have to really gain knowledge about the system. If you're an individual and you want to do something, if you want to file a right to know, but on the other side, what's the most common misunderstandings public officials have on the law? What's it from their point of view, as opposed to the person that wants to get the law, to get a right to know request from them? Do they know what it is? Do they actually know that there is a right to know law? I mean, no disrespect either.
They're supposed to, and they are able to get training, I believe, for free through the New Hampshire Municipal Association, which used to be sort of fighting for some of this narrowing of the state right to know law. But again, they seem to be pretty good. They have everything on their website, including the Attorney General's Guide to the Right to Know law. Yeah, I mean, it all depends. If you're in a tiny town with, 3 80-year-old select board members who have no training, and the town doesn't have a lot of resources to get them trained, and they're just used to doing things the way they've always done them. Good luck with that.
Good advice.
And like I said, court clerks are often saying, well, who are you? And you have to sign this out, or why do you want to see that file? Um, you don't have to tell them, but if you can, it's good to be polite and just say, well, I'm interested for some research I'm doing. That's all you have to
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
So, and it seems like good advice would be bring donuts whenever you go anywhere in a public building and say, hey, my name's so and so, and would you like a chocolate frosted?
Well, they don't always want, a frosted donut anywhere near their court file.
Yeah, probably.
Okay,
Yes,
but
I'm
yeah,
kidding. I'm
yeah.
kidding. Okay, last person on our panelists, and you've been very patient with us, Zach. We'd like to hear from you, and would you just kind of give us a little background on a little of your background so we can get to know you? You're our newest reporter. Nancy loves your writing. She brags about you every time I'm talking to her about how well you're doing. So, and then have you used the right to know law yet, or is that something that it's a part of what your line of expertise is? Tell us a little bit about yourself, Zach.
Well, I haven't used it yet, but I mainly cover government and politics. And before that, I worked at a daily newspaper in Lynn, Massachusetts for about 2 years. But I think one of the most important aspects of our job is to help the public really understand what their government is doing. And, to me, that means asking questions, requesting documents, and pushing for information that should belong to the public. And so, with any issue I write about, I try to approach it through the perspective of the reader. And I think government systems can sometimes feel complicated or maybe confusing. And my goal is to break them down and explain them clearly and simply so that people can truly get a grasp on what's happening around them. And since I've been covering New Hampshire, the people I've been encountered and spoken with have been nothing but helpful and supportive. And I just want to say that. So that means a lot. So that's a little bit about me, but thank you very much.
So do you enjoy working with In-Depth? Would be your first time working for an online news magazine, would it not?
Yes, ma'am. And I love it. I love every aspect of the work. And yeah.
Yeah, but you worked in Lynn. I worked for the Boston Herald for about 11 years. So Lynn might have been an interesting community to work to do your kind of work investigating also.
Yes, ma'am. It was very different, or not very, but it was a little different. It was mainly like I covered these two towns, Swampscott and Nahant. So it was a lot of select board meetings, school committee meetings, that sort of thing. But
Mhm.
I made a lot of great connections, and the people were fantastic, and it was great.
Sounds like a good training ground and a good for you in gaining experience in what you're doing. How long have you been reporting?
About 3 years now.
Good for you. Very good. Well, thank you for working with us. We really, I think we do a great job with the stories that we have. I know I just looking at this panel here that the amazing expertise that's here. It's a great place for you to be in. It'll be a good line on your resume also, I'll say.
Thank you very
Um,
much.
Laurie, I wanted to go back to you for a quick second. What motivated you? Was it this personal experience that you had that they raised your taxes and you said, I'm not taking that kind of a thing? Is that what got you started?
For sure. I mean, it really actually, when we moved in, our taxes jumped 50%. And I reacted to that and thought it was
50,
crazy.
50.
50. Yes. And so that was a huge increase. And I reacted thinking, oh, this is crazy. I'm going to have the assessor come out. And he was, and he pointed out, oh, I have a few mistakes here. And I thought, oh, good. He'll knock this thing down, like, I don't know, by $3,000 or $4,000. He knocked it down $2,000, the
Yeah.
assessment. I mean, it changed like $20. So I
Yeah.
was, I was, I was really discouraged. And I said to my husband, this is crazy. So I said, I'm just going to watch it. And by 2017, my taxes crossed 18,000 on my house, which was a 100-year-old home, original everything, wiring, plumbing, toilet was 1925, water
Wow.
closet, bathroom. And my neighbor on each side had a tax bill of 8,000. All had the same, bigger homes, old homes in Nashua. Mine was 18. So I called the assessing office. I talked to the chief. He was the most hostile individual I'd ever dealt with in government. He was horrible. And I said, look, I'm watching you. I'm going to watch. I'm going to make certain you're doing this stuff right because something is seriously wrong. And I called the mayor's office like 3 times to say, I want to talk to somebody. No one would return the call. So in 2018, new assessment numbers came out. And when they came out, my husband and I, gosh, we sat in bed for like weeks in the morning with our coffee fuming because we had overpaid by like 30 grand. And
Wow.
it was a lot. So I started my quest, and it was they just threw up so many walls. They had had a department that had fallen into disarray. The chief had left. They brought in another chief who was only a part-time worker, had health issues, wasn't in the office. They had one certified assessor who was sleeping on the job. Had become a supervisor, and he was heading off into parking lots instead of doing homes, and he was sleeping, the whole thing. So it was truly, yes, I mean, I wanted to fix something that I knew was wrong. And the
Yeah.
most important thing
Yeah.
when I started was talking to my neighbors. I think everyone who does a right to know request, everyone who's spoken here said, go make relationships, talk to people.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that's the very first thing I did. Fixing a bad assessment requires that you compare your property to your neighbors. I didn't want to do that without telling my neighbors I was
Right.
doing it and
Right.
showing them why. And they were very supportive. But I will tell you, the most difficult thing for me in Nashua is, and I think for other citizens, there is no communication for us with our city government. They've locked every door. The right to know administrator that they hired 3 years ago sits behind a locked door with no phone number, takes no calls, and will not answer any questions from the public. What
Hmm.
good is that? He should be in the clerk's office where you can walk up to him and ask questions. So
Hmm.
it's just it's just a wall here, and it's
Yeah.
just a I really think there are just evildoers in government that are just hiding a lot of things, and
Hmm.
we're in the dark side here. And
Hmm.
how you bust it to something brighter, I don't know. It's very, very difficult and very reputationally damaging, just
Yeah.
incredibly punitive.
Yeah. Thank you, Laurie. Paula, can I just ask you then, what advice would you give a regular citizen hearing all of this about filing their first request for the right to know?
I kind of feel like I was a citizen of Jackson, New Hampshire this fall when I went in and I had no relationship with anybody in the town to reach out to the the selectman's administrator and go over exactly what I was looking for documents and be very, on the phone instead of it being written out. So this had to do with Eric McGonson, who is the new owner of Black Mountain in Jackson. And he came into town and he got into a run-in with the police chief. The police chief decided that he wanted him out of town and they were going to have he basically asked the liquor commission to come in and look at the situation, and they were going to take the liquor license away at this mid-mountain cabin, not the underlying license, but a sub license that was there. And they were in court already. And he had received at the Superior Court level a a verdict from the court that the town had to hand over because he had already done a 91A request for information and he wasn't getting anywhere. And I sort of took a different tact. But I started to try to talk to this woman who was the administrative assistant to the selectman. The police chief was very hostile toward me. He described me as being writing a commissioned article, meaning that I was being paid for by Eric McGonson to do this story, which was fairly offensive to me and still is. But I said, I'm not going to go down that road and get angry that way. I'm going to talk to the selectmen who are his boss and their assistant and try to get the information that I needed. I did end up getting more than Eric had been able to get, even though he had a court order to disclose information, that there was a group of citizens that were concerned about what he was doing at that mountain, and they had petitioned the selectmen. Um, so, I mean, I go back to the whole thing about having relationships. I didn't have a relationship with that woman. She doesn't know me from, whatever, but I believe that if you start with an eye to eye, I mean, I was in a phone to phone conversation with her, but, and articulate what it is that you are looking for, chances are, if the person understands that those rights do exist, they will comply. So I don't know if that answered your question.
It's a tough road. And Garry, if I could just ask you, the law is supposed to maintain transparency and accountability in government. And how does it help if you can't get any information from anybody that you're getting this transparency? It just seems like a conundrum and I don't know, a failure to launch kind of a situation.
Well, the part of the problem with the right to know law is there's no teeth in it.
Did you say the fun?
I said the problem with the
Oh, the problem.
the right to know law is there really is no teeth in it. If they don't really, if you violate it, there's nothing that really happens. And until something really happens when you start violating it, then we're going to have lots of people just ignoring it. I mean,
Yeah.
the last involvement I had with the right to know request was over the EFA program and the LBA's legislative budget assistance performance audit of the Freedom Account program, Freedom Education Account program. And the people who run that, the scholarship, Children's Scholarship Fund New Hampshire, refused to hand over any information because they were a contractor. And even though the law says clearly in it that the information is the state's information, they said, no, the contract we have says it is ours. And they got the AG to back it up. And of course, Frank Edelblut was also backing it up. And an attorney asked me one time if I wanted some help with it. And I said, well, sure. And so we went in and we did a Freedom of Information, right to know request. And I told him, I said, I know what we're going to get. We're going to get that these are working papers and that they're not subject to the right to know law. And that's exactly what we got 5 days later. These are working papers. They're not subject to the right to know law. We were looking for the emails that went back and forth between the LBA and the
so it just doesn't have any teeth.
It has no teeth.
No teeth.
And I mean, until it has some teeth, it's what's going to be the way it's going to be, unfortunately. You're just dependent on somebody's good grade.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Thank you so much, panel. You've really been very good. And we've got a bunch of questions here. So I am going to start with Rob L6821. How is it acceptable that a dozen New Hampshire police departments can ignore right to know requests for months while others respond within days under the same statute? What's the answer for that? Anybody can take this.
I think
Paula, you were smiling.
it's a type of person who's in charge.
I'm sorry, say that again, Laurie.
It's a type of person who's in charge of the office. What their belief in is in transparency and what Garry just said. The law doesn't have a lot of teeth. And so the people who want to be dark about it get away with it because they force the average person to only go to a court to try and enforce it. It's very aggravating, or negotiate to try and get it. And these people who don't want to give it to you won't give it to you. So it's not acceptable. It's supposed to be complied with. And, other than writing about it, getting others to file, trying to encourage others to participate, sometimes you're not successful unless you take a legal approach. And I would only recommend you do that on your own because paying lawyers for this is just absurd.
Oh, anytime you get a lawyer involved, I know. The second part on his question or his or her question, Rob L 6821, should repeat violators of RSA 91A be publicly named in an annual statewide report, along with the nature of the violations and any penalties imposed? What do you think, Nancy? You want to run a list like that, like the Laurie list, the right to know list?
I think it would be very difficult to compile such a list, but I think shaming is a great way to get a start on it.
Paul, you're muted. Polly, did you have a comment? You're still muted though, please. There you go.
There you go.
It's saying I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I would, in the case of a police department, I would be letting the selectmen in the town know that this is an issue, and then I would run it through a couple of other places, like who influence them, maybe the county government, maybe a neighboring police department, who may have information that you may be able to get help from, but to like spread it out. If you've got a police department that's not giving you anything, work it up the chain of command. Those guys work for the town, and that is information that the town needs to give to the public. So
I would also try the Attorney General's office because the Attorney General is the chief law enforcement officer in the state. It wouldn't help, but I would try it. I'm not optimistic.
Well, isn't that part of our tax dollars? The police aren't we paying their salaries? It's an old idea, but come on. Okay, let's move on. Maura Keegan 8351's question is, how does this affect the contract that supply the government with reports and information? Example, the assessment companies or studies that provide information. I want to know how they compiled information. Who wants to take that?
Is she talking like property assessments?
Um,
I'm guessing she might be.
It could be. She might join in after the, now that she's hearing the question. But so there must be government reports done by these public information, these offices that they have to file reports, right?
They
How does
do. I
it?
mean, a city hires a company. Most of them don't have anyone in-house. You contract out to a property assessing company like Vision or Avatar in this state. They come in, they do a big assessment. They're required to submit um, a USPAP report to the Department of Revenue Administration. So this very voluminous report goes to the DRA, which is a public record that has all the assessments of the properties, the sales data they compiled to create a model to determine the new assessments. All of that is put into a very voluminous record that's available to the public and should be in your assessing office. So those are all public records. The assessing office would have a manual, very detailed manual that will explain how assessments are built and done and what the process is like in your town or city. And then the city also, your town submits an MS1, an end of the yearly MS1 that looks at all the property valuation within your municipality and calculates it out year over year. And they actually keep that MS1 every day. Every day they're required to produce a property valuation report. But the compile
What's an MS1?
it's a it's a compilation of all your assessed properties in your municipality. And it breaks it down by category: residential, commercial, exempt properties, properties that are nonprofits that receive tax exemption, pilot programs, payment in lieu of taxes. All these different categories get broken out. And you're able to see how your property is delineated within your municipality. And you can see year over year whether your valuations have gone up or down, or what portion of your valuations have gone up or down. Your commercials fell, but your residentials went up, etc. So that's all public records, pretty widely available. I don't see a lot of people not disclosing that or being resistant on that. In Nashua, the only reason they were resistant on giving you a manual is because they didn't have one. So that was one of the things the DRA got on them for, and they had to create one.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So that's how that works.
Okay. Drip Dead Gaming is asking, how does 2024 DOJ memo on a 91A relative to nonprofits who operate under majority public grant funding and act providing core governmental functions not apply to NHCADSV? All
It
right.
is
I'm not sure
with-
exactly what that means, but someone here must.
Yeah.
Catherine, go right ahead.
I do.
Oh,
I know what
Catherine and
that
Damon
means.
will answer. Okay.
The folks led by Claire Best, who have been trying to derail the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. That's one of their questions. That's their push to
Oh,
open it up. That's what that's about.
okay. Catherine, do you want to add something on that?
Well, I wanted to say, sort of building on what Garry and Damien said, the rules seem to be different for different nonprofits. The people who want more disclosure from the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence cite the example of New Hampshire Hospital. Probably they could cite Hampstead Hospital, for example, which primarily operates under state contracts. And they disclose all kinds of financial information. But when it comes to EFAs, the Attorney General's office won't enforce it. So it really depends on what the Attorney General's office and the legislature want to enforce and what the courts are willing to enforce. I'd love to see somebody actually bring that case and say, look, make right to know requests and get turned down and take it to court. But that would take a lot of years and a lot of resources.
And that case feeds right into my art center case, because there were nonprofit and for-profit companies that were formed that received all of the public tax dollars, the $21 million in bonds to build the art center. And they were operating as if they didn't have public money. And I ended up beating them in court up at the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court said, hey, we have case law going back to the 70s and 80s that says you have to do a government function test, and that the court exhibited flawed logic when it claimed that these for-profit and nonprofits didn't have to disclose information. So that was a huge win, and the case law did exist. And my case from 2025 last year added another layer of case law. So I actually think the group has a valid complaint that there are records there that, exemptions work. Hospitals are perfect places to look at how exemptions work. You can get records from a hospital, but they protect patient information and doctor information like, the hammer's out. So it works. So in this case, given all of the public money that feeds into this grant program, I don't see why there can't be some level of transparency. And of course, nobody is excited as to bring a lawsuit forward to go fight it in court, because how expensive it is and how long and drawn out it is.
Right. Okay, thank you. All right, I've got 3 comments from Robert Tanguay. I'm not sure if am pronouncing your name correctly. First, he said Manchester in the halfway house is what he wrote. And then he said New Hampshire Article 8 plus oath of office violates Constitution shall be removed from office. And he said you can go to the ombudsman but waive right to sue. Is that meaning anything to anybody? New Hampshire Article 8, what is that?
That's probably the Constitution, but there is no ombudsman right now.
Oh,
So,
right.
and we don't know if there will be. So that's just not something people can do right now.
we're not optimistic they're going to have one in any time soon.
No.
No, and that was going to be the cheapest way to go through it, because somebody said it's a $25 fee to file
Right.
or request the information.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And part one, Article 8 is the teeth of the constitutional teeth. We're one of only like 6 or 7 states that builds a constitutional language into our right to know law. We have a
Right.
constitutional hook. That's supposed to give us more power. I'm failing to see how it's actually working for us, but it does say that government will be open, accessible, accountable, and responsive. And to that end, you should expect to receive records. Whenever I submit a right to know petition to the court, I put in part one, Article 8. And like Nancy said, I put part one, Article 8 into my requests. But I can tell you, for all the times I filed in court, I think every time a judge has ignored it and said it doesn't matter, that doesn't apply here. I don't know how it doesn't. I can't seem to have them respect the constitutional language at all. They decouple it. So
Hmm.
it's very confusing, but we supposedly have this great hook.
Okay. Rob L6821 is back again with, if delays, denials, and non-answers are becoming more common, what specific changes do you support so RSA 91A is enforceable in practice and not just on paper? How do you enforce these kind of things? If we go back to Garry, there's no teeth in the law. What do you do? How do you put some teeth in the law? That would be my question.
I know Right to Know New Hampshire wants to look next year at doing an overhaul. You know, the last big overhaul was 2008, and I think it needs an overhaul. It's going on 20 years, and I think
Yeah.
we're really hitting some roadblocks. And you have to be really careful when you legislate for RSA 91A, not to create too many um, language obstacles that complicate or frustrate the statute such that it becomes so dense it's hard to interpret. You know, there's a lot of judges that will tell you RSA 91A as the statute's written today is very complex and hard to interpret. And in fact, if you look at it, a lot of judges get overturned on RSA 91A. They don't do well with it. So maybe it does need to be simplified. Maybe we need to build more teeth into it. We actually think you do in Right to Know New Hampshire, and it needs an overhaul. But you
Yeah.
can imagine the political hill you got to climb to do that.
Yeah.
Laurie,
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up Right to Know New Hampshire. It's a grassroots organization that has done a lot of work over the years for improving people's access and training citizens in how to go about doing it. I actually use on their website, Right to Know New Hampshire, they have a template to do your right to know request. And I actually use that. It's simple. It's very simple. On our website at InDepthNH.org, we have a little link to it on the right-hand side. If you scroll down, because I think they have such great information.
Yeah, it's great. I love that group. It's really interesting, and we're seeing some young people step in now who are filing. And you know, they really want records, and a lot of them have said to me, I don't want to go through what you went through. I don't want to
Yeah.
be in your situation. You know,
Yeah.
I'm 35 years old and I expect my government to respond to me. And I love their enthusiasm. I'm a little frightened for them and how they're going to make, they're struggling.
Yeah.
But I love the new people coming in, and the website is awesome. And there's a lot of case law on that website regarding open records that is good to reference and study.
Okay.
I'm curious.
Could I say one final thing?
You can say more than one final thing.
Don't forget the media. When newspapers were a force in this state, they had lawyers on retainer. When the AP was a force in this state, which sadly they're down to 2 or 2.5, maybe 3 reporters at any given time. We had lawyers on retainer to pursue these cases. That's not happening anymore. So support your local media and take stories that are bigger than just your personal situation to your local media and see if you can get somebody interested. Nobody's going to write about your dispute with your neighbor, But if it's a larger dispute over getting records about something that affects everybody, like in Laurie's case, assessments, if it's about getting records about EFAs, supporting the media and going to the media and telling them you're trying to get information and government is refusing to yield it, that is the light that we need to shed during Sunshine Week and all year round.
Katharine, I'm so glad you brought that up. You know, since the year 2000, New Hampshire has lost 75% of all news jobs. They're just gone. That could be, you know, in the printing department, different departments, but 75% gone. When I was at the Union Leader years ago, I think in around the year 2000, we had 28 full-time reporters plus correspondence. And when I left, I think we were down to 8. And I love that paper. You know, it's not the only one suffering. All of the dailies are a shadow of their former selves. And a couple are owned by, you know, out-of-state conglomerates that just want to put up some garbage and pretend it's news. Yeah, and we have some people really working hard at a lot of the newspapers. I don't mean to belittle them or put them down. I think the Union Leader puts out a great product when we look at how few reporters we have left. But we have a lot of people. There's a lot of news that just goes uncovered, I believe, because who has the time to, you know, reporter-wise, we make time because that's part of our mission, but we can't get to everything, and I wish we could. And we will eventually, so. But I'm
Okay.
really glad, you know, I can remember talking with one judge one time years ago, and there had been a bad editorial about him in the Union Leader, and he was reading it at his breakfast table, and his little daughter said, "Don't worry, Daddy, let it go in one eye, out the other." And I always just love that quote. And it's even better. I just don't feel comfortable saying who the judge was, but he, you know, it mattered, and people could call up the paper and get them in trouble, get the elected officials in trouble, and get a bad editorial.
Yeah.
And we'll get that clout again, hopefully the news outlet. And I think a lot of people are trying. You have a lot of hardworking reporters out there. Talk to them.
And that's why we're doing this tonight. We're showing the faces of reporters and people who can get things done.
I think one of the viewers said we should do this every week. And I don't think that's a bad idea. If anybody
no,
wants to join me, not every week, but
no, right.
but more
All right, we have
often,
questions from the audience. All right, Proud Mule 1A said, right to know violators list sounds like it may be helpful to me. People who are trying to keep things dark might be motivated by some light. Do you think?
I think what would be most effective is having some of these databases within your municipality or through the state where everyone who files a right to know, it goes into a database where you can search and you can see what the response was. And you'll be able to see responses that yielded records and responses that didn't. Some states are adopting this, some municipalities are adopting this. I would like to see Nashua have a repository of the right to know responses they're producing because I've seen some of them and they are terrible. And I think they need to be on a public database and people will understand what you're up against and maybe they'll feel, that's kind of like your wall of shame. Maybe you'll feel a little more pressure to be more responsive when people look at this. Because I
Well-
saw an email last week from just a general citizen who said, don't send me to the right to know administrator. I'd rather gnaw my arm off. They were very frustrated by what they were getting.
Well,
And so
don't you think that the Laurie list is a good example of showing things that need to be shown, putting light on that? So, Paula, did you have a comment?
I just
And
wanted to
we
say,
still have more questions also in the chat. So
I just
again,
want, I just wanted to say that the right to know request that I have currently is about whether or not the Department of Environmental Services followed the Right to Know Act.
I think what,
Anyway,
That's
so.
great. That's great.
oh, and I
And
just
so that
wanted,
is the way that, but a list would, tell that. But anyway, so I just want to say that.
I just wanted to say someone in the chat was questioning why I would keep the judge's name confidential, and the judge is deceased, and I just didn't feel comfortable saying that particular name because it was a personal conversation. I don't have any relationship with any living judge.
Okay. So Joe Paquette 4332 said Damien has his own disclosures regarding his comments just now. Does that what's your comment about that, Damien?
Huh?
Yeah, Damien has his own disclosures regarding his comments just now. I'm not sure what he means by that. So are we sure?
I,
Nope.
I don't know. I kind of anticipated. Some people aren't happy with things I write sometimes in various publications, and I gotta say, I'm sorry that you don't like my manners. They're pretty bad. They grieve me, and I worry about them on long winter evenings.
Okay, all right. And I see this note that you were talking about, Nancy. I would like to see this show come once a week live so we can grow the audience. Oi, that's my comment. Let's see. Damien, would you be willing to disclose who is paying him to defame private citizens? I'm not sure I understand that. Is that something
That
you
would
would?
be the Trilateral Commission and the Bilderberg Group.
Okay.
And how much is it? How many millions of dollars are you making for your?
I'm rolling in it, Nancy. That's I'm living the life of a gentleman farmer out here.
Aye, aye, aye. All right. Let's see. Let's see. Very telling years later that Nancy West is not comfortable talking about judges.
Oh, that's what I mentioned. The judge that I mentioned in
Oh,
that
I see.
comment is
Okay.
deceased, and
Okay.
I didn't want to offend any of his families. That's
Okay. All right. And I got to go back to Damien. Ask Damien if he or a family member receives benefits from NHCDSV and if he should recuse from making defamatory comments about Claire Best. Is that
I
something
just,
you want
yeah,
to
I just
address or
want to
not?
say that it's clear that somebody doesn't like me or Damien,
Okay.
That's
and that's
that's okay.
okay. We don't like them. No, we do like them also.
I uh, the I'm trying to come up with a smart ass response on the fly, but I'll just say they're asking me if I'm receiving benefits or money or a family member is, and I'll just say categorically no.
No, there you are.
Get a new line.
All right. Well, this is a public forum and this is what happens in a public forum. So, and then I have my own question. So that we've covered all the questions. We've got to love the program. Lori, they've got SD, I think it's LC7GN. Lori, that's a great idea. I'm not sure which idea they were referring to, but they liked it. And they're also saying that they love this program. Okay, we've got just a few minutes left, so let's just cover some more questions if I may. Should governments be required to proactively publish more records online so people don't have to request them? Is that something the government should be doing for us?
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's easier.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But will
most
they?
of the documents that we seek should not be hidden, and you shouldn't have to know the magic words in order for them to hand them over. It should be automatically made available to the public. We have this whole convoluted system that's outdated, and it would take a major effort to get everybody online and get everything accessible. But there's no reason we should have to go through this.
No, and there's cases that they know are going to be requested by reporters. They can keep that in mind when they're getting them up. If there's legitimate confidential information, and I don't think there's a whole lot that is legitimate. It's information, perhaps, family court, juvenile cases. I would like to see all of that public, and with the caveat that reporters would respect people like we do with rape victims. We in New Hampshire, newspapers do not publish the names of rape victims unless they're requested, unless the rape victim would ask us to do that. And I know there's a movement afoot to have any victims' names uh, redacted or deleted. I know the Attorney General's office, and I've asked them for the protocols of how they're doing this. They'll put out a press release about a crime and only put their crime victim's name in initials, even though it is definitely not a rape case. This could be in a theft case. And I've pushed back on that and pushed back on that. I've gone to the courts and I've asked their spokesman, can you tell me what protocol allows people to file cases anonymously? And they won't even tell me what the basis is for anonymous filings, as they allowed with all of the police officers who filed to have their names removed from the Laurie list. They're all filed as John or Jane Doe. I see no reason why those were allowed by the court, except that the AG's office blames it on the court. They say, well, the court did that. And the court will not say why or what the protocols are. And this is something I've seen over the years. I'm like the old timer here. Years ago, even the names of rape victims were in court records. We were trusted not to use them. And I don't know of any case where, reporters have done that without the request. Sometimes if the survivor is an adult and wants to get the word out about the particular incident, that's different. But I don't know of any case where a news outlet has reported the name of a rape victim and we could be trusted. It's the same with like child abuse. The only people, in my opinion, that are protected by the confidentiality in child protection laws are the bureaucracies that don't want to have to kind of explain when something really terrible happens. And trust the reporter, not use the names of the child or even the parents. I think if people knew how much child abuse and very serious child abuse is rampant in New Hampshire, that we might have some legislation about it, instead of the culture war legislation we seem to be much more interested in this year.
Maureen Keegan 8351 is asking, is there another forum Thursday at a college? I was looking and found this. Which one is that?
Yes. Laurie, isn't that the Union
The
Leader
Nacky
one?
Loeb. It's
Nacky
the
Loeb.
Loeb Institute at St. Anne's Anselm's political building for their Sunshine Week. It's their presentation tomorrow night from 6 o'clock to 7:30. And Chuck Douglas is the guest speaker on open records. They used to do a panel. They're not doing a panel anymore. And you can sign up online if you go to the Loeb Sunshine Week conference. It's going to have a registration button. It's free. They just want to know who's coming.
Yeah.
And you can click it and then you can go up tomorrow. They've done them Zoom in the past, but they're doing in-person only. A lot of times they'll film it and put it out later, but it's interesting. You can network, you meet a lot of interesting people.
So Joe Paquette of 4332, we thank you for the sunshine and hope you will continue to bring it to many places, including your own reporting. Thank you. And Maureen Keegan 8351 is saying our town report is now online and helpful. Very good. And I would ask, are there any examples from other states that New Hampshire should consider adopting, how they're handling it, that then we could make our law better, brighter, more effective? That's what I find that is not effective.
I can speak to that in one particular issue, and that is I reported almost 2 decades ago now on, I believe, Minnesota and some other states opening child abuse and neglect cases to the public. It's the common wisdom has always been, oh, you have to protect these children, especially their identities, especially if they're from small communities. But what the research has found in states that have opened up these hearings is that, first of all, hardly anybody comes. Often, when they do, it allows relatives and support people who may not be the children's family members to come support them at a hearing, instead of those hearings being closed, say to teachers or school counselors or healthcare workers who have seen that child and seen the effects of the neglect and the abuse. They're excluded when hearings are closed. And the fact of the matter is 99.9% of these hearings are never going to be reported upon. And what they found is that it's actually the only people who benefit from closing those hearings is the abusers or the neglectful parents or guardians. So that's something I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon in New Hampshire, but I would love to see that raised again and again, especially at the legislature, because we've all seen these horrific child abuse cases like Harmony Montgomery. When you close those cases, nobody knows what's going on. People who can support those children are not allowed to be in the courtroom. We had a pilot project, which I had to. A judge excluded me. I called up the Chief Justice of the Family Court, I don't know, about 18, 19 years ago and said, there's this pilot project built into the law. And I walked back into that courtroom for the next hearing, and the judge told all the lawyers for every side, DCYF and the lawyers representing the parents and the guardian ad litem for the child, wanted me excluded. And the judge said, she knows the law. You're going to have to talk to her and figure out how we're going to do this. Unfortunately, I ended up going out on leave before I ever wrote that story. But the bottom line was I didn't report the child's name. And there are ways to handle that, just like with adult or child sexual abuse victims, abuse and neglect victims. You can protect their identity, but having those hearings open is beneficial in the long run, I think.
So we have 3 minutes left. We're going to close off at 7:30. I just have to keep saying that we did this a year ago. We seem to be in the same place that we are now. And what role should the legislature play in strengthening or clarifying this law? And will they even find it a priority that they should be doing something?
I wouldn't count on the legislature.
Yeah, I know. Is there a practical step that, if someone listening today can take and go to tomorrow morning and do something? What would you have them do?
File a right to know request. Call a reporter. Those are some of the good tidbits that came out tonight, I think.
And I would say start with a conversation. Go to your city hall. Let's say you want something, or your town office, and have a conversation with somebody who's knowledgeable about the records you want. Most municipalities will try to engage, and there are frontline workers that want to be supportive. It's all depends on the management and the management structure itself to close things down. But start with having a conversation and understanding what records exist, and maybe finding out what's behind the counter that's available for you to look at right now. What is there for inspection? Your clerk's office has a lot of inspectable records that might be right there. And spend some time to look at something you want. And then as you develop some thoughts about an area you're concerned about, then write a right to know request. Go to Right to Know New Hampshire and pick up that template, which cites the statute and gives you an idea. And then try to put it together. And most importantly, remember, it's not about asking questions, it's about asking for records. So many people start off with, I asked a question and they didn't answer me. Well, because they don't have to answer questions. You do that at the counter in dialogue, but then when you write it, you have to really focus on records. And you can say, if it's easier for you to just answer a question, by all means, please do that if it reduces the burden for the records you're getting for me. Otherwise, you're getting records.
Okay. All right. I've got a note here. Katharine, do you want me to give out your email address? Are you? Yes, okay.
Sure.
That if you want to reach out to Katharine Webster, she's at Katharine with a K, Katharine_Webster at MSN.com. And it is now 7:30. We are going to end on time, and I am grateful, and I say thank you to all of our great panelists. This was a great discussion. It was really, really useful, and I hope our audience got a lot out of it. And we're not going to do this every week, though, folks. I can tell you that. But we'll do them regularly. Let's promise that, right, Nance? We'll do something
Right.
regularly.
Right.
So,
And
all
sign
right.
up for our free newsletter. We're reporting on a lot of some of the issues that came up tonight. And
Yeah,
we'd love to have you as our, we have like so many, we had, I think, 2.5 million readers in the last year between our website and the newspapers that pick up our stories. And we have like 17,250 people who signed up for our free newsletter. And
Wow.
so it's really amazing how much we've grown in the last couple of years. I think we're touching a chord with people, but a lot of these, we just have to keep at this excellent reporters, experienced reporters and brand new Zach, and we love doing it. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you so very much. And Montana, I'm going to let you take it from here on the back end of our group. And I'll say thank you once again to all of our panel, and we'll say good night.
Good
All right,
night to everybody. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you very much.